Please welcome Mayor Richard Arrington.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Alabama Bound. My work is entitled There Is Hope for the World. It's my memoir. It was published by the University of Alabama Press. It came out in October 2008. And I'll make just a few brief comments. I was on earlier this morning and very apologetically missed my time. But it's a memoir about a 28-year political experience I had here in Birmingham. And it is also a story about a city in transition. What happened in the city of Birmingham during the 28-year tenure that I had as mayor of the city. We try to talk about Birmingham as it changes and as it goes through several major transitions. We also talk about the time as being an era of the coming of African American mayors to medium-sized and larger cities in Birmingham. For example, if you were to look at that particular period of time, you would know that back in 1968, Cleveland, Ohio elected Carl Stokes for mayor, that first African American mayor. And then right behind that, Gary, Indiana, the first industrial city with an African American mayor. In 1967, Richard Hatcher was elected mayor there. And then Tom Bradley, the only African American mayor in the city of Los Angeles, was elected in 73. In 74, Atlanta, Maynard Jackson, the first African American mayor. In 1974, a week after Maynard Jackson was sworn in office, a week later, Coleman Young, a native of Alabama, but who grew up in Detroit, Michigan, was elected as the first African American mayor of Detroit, Michigan. And then in 1978, Ernest Dutch Mariel down in New Orleans was elected the first African American mayor in New Orleans. And then in 1979, I was elected the first African American mayor here in Birmingham. And so my memoir is about the city, about that time, and about that election. I start out and omit some things that there's not even time for me to talk about here, because a professor at Vanderbilt, Dr. Jimmy Franklin, had written a book about my administration called Back to Birmingham. And then a professor at Syracuse University, Dr. Burnham, has written a book where he talks about the Justice Department, and he devotes his chapter 8 to talking about the Arrington administration in Birmingham. And so I don't go into great detail there. But we do talk about our experiences. We do mention the fact that a few vignettes about some interesting personalities, from Willie Mays, who was a classmate of mine here in Birmingham, a great Hall of Fame baseball player. I talk about an English teacher who taught me all the grammar I know today, whose name was Angelina Ray, who married the coach at my high school, who was the coach of my basketball team, Reverend Rice. And they later had a daughter named Condoleezza Rice. And of course, I've told Condoleezza many times on visits back to Birmingham what a great teacher her mother was, and the fact that she taught me all of the little grammar I know today. And we talk about some other rather interesting experience. But let me close out, because of time, we're talking about the title to this book, There Is Hope for the World. I was in Copenhagen, Denmark, my wife and I, and the newspapers in Copenhagen carried a small article noting that the mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, was visiting Copenhagen. And you will, from reading this book, understand or get some idea of what the perception was that people in the world had about Birmingham. They had come to Birmingham during the time of the Civil Rights Movement, and they had written about Birmingham all over the world, everywhere. And then they left and wrote no more about Birmingham until one day across the line comes the message, Birmingham has a black mayor. And again they put Birmingham in that local paper. So I'm in Copenhagen. That night I get a courier comes to my hotel room with an invitation from a mayor just across the bay from Copenhagen in a little city in Sweden called Landskrona. And he wants us to be his guest of honor at a luncheon the next day, and of course we accepted. We went across the bay, took the boat across the bay the next day to Landskrona. There was a crowd waiting there near the dock where the boat docked. City Hall is only about a block from the dock. And the crowd is waiting, and as we walked with the mayor of Landskrona up to City Hall there, two Swedish women come out of the crowd and stopped me. And one asked me, are you the mayor of Birmingham, Alabama? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, we read about it. But we had to come to see it for ourselves. Because if Birmingham, Alabama can have a black mayor, there's hope for the world. And that's the story, one of the stories I tell in this book, of that event and that day in Landskrona, Sweden. And I took my title from that meeting, There's Hope for the World. Thank you very much.